walls were originally plywood.
Yes, they were kind of a yellow plywood, and what I decided to do is use 1x6 pine boards, and we've covered the walls in that, and then we've added a crown molding, and then we painted everything white.
So you just went over the old paneling?
I went right over the old paneling. It was much more cost effective. And then we covered up the fireplace, because the fireplace was just an old brick fireplace. In fact, it wasn't even great old brick. It was just looked like new brick. And I covered it with something called Santa Barbara stone, which has an old world quality to it. And I work with the masons, because I'm always joking, and when I work with masons, better throw away that level. I want it just old, and I want it to look like it's been there 100 years. And that's kind of one of the things behind all my decorating, is I like things to look like they have been there forever.
Now, in this room, you have a lot of very interesting pieces of furniture. One of my favorites is the tutor's desk.
The tutor's desk is one of my favorite pieces as well. I was at an antique show recently, and I was fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time, and I bought it. I just loved it. And it's a wonderful little place. When my grandchildren come over, they sit there on the little old English benches and play in the tutor's desk. I'm hoping they're going to remember that when they're big. Oh, I remember when I used to sit there.
You're lucky in this room. You have this wonderful open case where you can actually showcase your calico or chinsware. In the kitchen, you actually took some of the cabinet doors off to create a cabinet.
I did. I didn't have room for a chintz cabinet in there, or a hutch of any kind, and I had that huge cabinet, and I just took the doors off and just filled it with old antique chintz and reproductions. I use antiques and reproductions all the time. I mix them all the time.
You're referring to the chintz china.
Yes.
I think many people think of chintz as the polished cotton overall floral fabric.
Well, that is confusing. You're right about that, and it does confuse a lot of people. But basically, chintzing was a process that they did to fabric, to cotton fabrics, and it gave it that sheen. And then it became commonly known as chintz fabric. But the man that invented chintz back in the late 1800s and early 1900s owned a dish company in England, and he saw this pattern on a lady's dress, and he said, gee, why can't I put that on dishes? And thus, chintz has become a double meaning.
I see.
So it is now on dishes.
Would chintz be more of an English way of defining that look, and calico more American?
I think you're exactly right. I think calico was the American version of it.
I have to talk about the curtains, because I just knew if I lived long enough that these Priscilla curtains would come back, and leave it to Gail to have them in almost every room of their house. This is so cottage to me. I mean, this is the ultimate Americana look, and yet you don't see it much.
Well, you know, I looked everywhere to find these Priscilla curtains. I couldn't find them. I finally found them in a catalog.
Yeah.
But they're just wonderful nylon curtains that you can wash and put back up. But this house had these great, big, gorgeous windows. And so I decided I just didn't want to drape them. I still want to see the views out of them. And I love the look of the old 40s cottages, and that's what these were. These cottages are 45 years old.
Let's go down the hall to the master bedroom, because there again you have that overall pattern feeling everywhere. You've wallpapered the ceilings, you've wallpapered the walls, you have 4, 5, 6 different patterns, but they complement each other rather than fight each other. Let's talk about that.
I think people are afraid sometimes to use wallpaper, and I think when you say wallpaper, everyone has a different vision of it. But in the bedroom, I used a floral on the walls, and I'm not afraid to put a painting over top of that. And I like to wallpaper ceilings, because I think that it helps you envelop yourself in this room so that your design doesn't just stop and then the ceiling is nothing. Now, in some cases I don't, but normally if I'm going to paper a room, I paper the ceiling.
Let's talk about your dressing room, because there you've really created an environment with wallpaper.
That room was so small, and it was right next to the master bedroom, that I decided to make it be a dressing room for myself. And I took the flowers all the way up onto the ceiling, so I feel like I'm enveloped in this wonderful room of roses. And I think every lady should have a pretty place to get dressed in the morning.
Wow. Well, thanks so much,
You're
Gail.
welcome.
This has been fun. We'll be right back. Next, we'll see another of Gail's transformations. She turned the little house next door into another charming cottage, but with a much different look. And later in the show, we'll see how one architect worked within the footprint of a 60-year-old house to turn it into a dazzling but contemporary home. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We've just seen how designer Gail Claridge turned a 45-year-old run-down little farmhouse into a charming country cottage for herself and her husband. But she also needed a place for her family and friends to stay when they came to visit. So she went to work on the little farmhouse next door. It's just as charming, but with an entirely different look. Just a mere 5 steps away from the other cottage is still a new variation on the theme of the cottage look. What was this place like?
This place, honest to goodness, I thought maybe I would have to tear it down. It was that bad.
Now, when you bought the house, one of the best things going for it was the fact that it did have the pine paneling, but it had taken on kind of an orange shellac tone over time because of the discoloration.
Right. I think we've all seen that. Cabins that are done in pine paneling that have all turned orange. And I loved the look of the natural wood, and I didn't want to paint it in here. So what I did is I added a little bit of pine. There was areas where maybe 3 walls were pine and the 4th one wasn't. So I added a little extra pine.
But how did you get rid of the orange to begin with?
And then I had it all stripped. We had to strip it down, and the trick to pine is after you strip it, it has to be bleached. They use something called wood bleach, and they bleach it down, and then that way when they stain it again, it'll never turn orange again.
And of course they don't mix shellacs like they used to, which is a very yellowing agent in it.
Correct. And we've also mixed 2 kinds of wood. I've got the pine, which I've got all these antique pieces of pine furniture, and the other thing is that I've used the old green painted furniture in here because I felt it needed a little punch. So we found this old gable that was green at one time, and it's all worn off, and a little hutch that's green. So I've used green painted furniture, and I think painted furniture is quite country-like, so
definitely.
I like that.
Now, in the master bedroom, it feels as though it's a perfect place to have extra guests. This is a house that can really handle a lot of kids, a lot of people.
I used a beautiful old bedspread that I've had for many, many years that was in my home before, and it's called Point de Venise, and it's a needle lace that was made many years ago in France, and quite gorgeous, and I use it on this bed. Kind of delicate, but nobody's sleeping there right now, so it's fine.
Let's talk a little bit about how you use the yellow chintz.
Well, actually, yellow is such a fun color, and if you've never decorated with yellow, you owe yourself a favor to try it. It seems like everyone loves it, and I think part of that is the color. The key is not using everything plain, so I've mixed a red and green floral on a yellow background. The wallpaper has a yellow background, and I've mixed mini prints with large prints.
Now, also in this cottage, you've used the same wonderful Priscilla shears that you have in the other house. And it's unbelievable how romantic it is as the light filters through that into the room.
Well, you know, to replace all the windows, and we had just aluminum windows in this cottage, was going to be very expensive. And I thought, I really don't want to put all that money into this cottage. And by using the Priscilla curtains, it disguised the windows. It made them look wonderful. They were very inexpensive, and the windows look great. I don't have to replace them now.
It's interesting how it's really classic.
Well, you know, the Priscillas, I think, can be masculine or feminine, depending on where you use them. And in the case of the little guest bedroom with the black quilt, I decided to do that room in a little bit more of a masculine feeling, and I think they work well in there.
Sure, the country, if you've got a quilt, you've got an old wash basin and that classic tile. You know, it's interesting with some of the accessories, how you can make it feel overly feminine or overly
I
masculine.
think that I try to get my decorating to look like men like it and women like it, where it has masculine furniture and yet feminine touches. So I think you can afford to have, you know, a nice balance there.
Right. Now, the kitchen had to be totally redone.
Yes, kitchen had to be totally redone. We actually recycled some cabinets that we removed from a kitchen that we were remodeling that they were going to throw away, and they were old.